I'm going to make some stock today, and I'm sure a lot of people already know this trick. This is a box I just keep in the freezer, and every time I prepare vegetables, I just get the box out, and most of the trimmings go in here. So we're going to make stock out of this, so let's have a look at what's in here. We've got the base of an onion, we've got the papery skin from an onion. This bit's really surprising actually. You'd be surprised how much flavour and colour there is just in that dry papery skin of an onion. And this is why, if you see me prepare onions, you might think I'm cutting quite a lot off and I'm discarding quite a bit of the kind of outer skin. But it just goes in the stock box, so it's not wasted. So let's see what else we got. We've got the top of that pepper that I fire roasted. We've got a mushroom stalk. I think that's fennel there. That's just trimmings from fennel. A bit more fennel there. Carrot peelings, carrot tops and tails. Really, almost any vegetable goes in here. The only thing I don't tend to put in here is potato peelings, because I just find they make the stock cloudy and they almost kind of subtract flavour from the stock. So every time I do vegetables, I just get this box out, add a bit more to it, put it back in the freezer. And when it's full up, we make stock. That would be a vegetable stock. I'm actually going to make a meat and vegetable stock today. So also, and these were in the same box, I've got some bones from pork spare ribs that we got from the Chinese takeaway. So any kind of meat bones, so the bones from a roast chicken, even if you just go to KFC and get a bargain bucket, if you save the bones from that, you can make stock from them. So we're using pork bones today. That's all I've got in there. Normally there'd be pork and chicken and maybe a few other things. Anyway, let's go and prepare the stock. So into my slow cooker, those bones are just going to go in. All of those vegetable trimmings. And then I'm just going to cover it with water. I'm using boiling water from the kettle. You can just use cold water, but I find using boiling water gets us off to a good start. And if anything's kind of floating, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to make sure everything's submerged. We'll have a few bay leaves in there. Some people add salt at this stage. I prefer not to, because salt's a really hard thing to take out, but it's easy to add at the end. And I don't think it really makes any difference to the way this stock will develop as it cooks. So the slow cooker's just going to go on auto now, and I'll leave that to cook for probably 6 to 8 hours until I feel like everything's cooked and the flavours come out. So I've got to wait for this to cook, but you don't have to. So in a minute we'll just see what that turns into. And just to try to waste as little as possible, I've also just rinsed out the box for any little last bits that are in there. We'll put that in as well. Right, that's been going all day. Let's just take a close look at it. So what we've now got is, well, a dark red-brown stock. Most of that colour has come from the onion skins. It smells amazing. It's just full of aromas and it smells really rich. So we've got to strain that now. And for straining, I've got a small strainer there, and I sit the colander on top of that. That's really mainly to keep the colander out of the jug, but also it does filter it twice because the strainer at the bottom's got smaller holes than the colander. So I'm just going to chuck that all into there. Look at that colour. So I will leave that to drain. All of this stuff in the top here I will just discard. I've got a food waste bin that goes off to a big digester where it's used to make biogas, and then compost comes out the other end. I could put that on my compost heap, but meat and cooked food tends to attract vermin, so I tend not to do that. If I was just making vegetable stock, I probably would, but because there's meat bones in here, I will probably put that in the brown bin, and the council will take that away to be digested into biogas. And there we go, that stock can now be used for soup or stew or risotto or any number of dishes. I'm probably going to use some of this for soup, and I'll pour some of it into a container, allow it to cool and freeze it, and I'll bring it out some other time. I'll just avoid pouring out the very last little bit of this, because sometimes you can get a little bit of grit from the carrot tops or whatever in the bottom of the jug, so we'll just leave that behind. That, once it's cooled down, can be frozen, and then it can either be thawed and used, or it can actually be used directly from frozen. You can actually just dump that into a saucepan as a block of frozen stock and warm it through, and it will thaw in the pan. So I'm going to use some of that stock to make a soup, and it's going to be kind of a bit like minestrone. And I'm not going to cover that in massive detail, but just really quickly. So I've got carrots, celery and garlic in there. So the base of the celery is then in there, my carrot peelings and everything are in there as well. So we kind of started the whole process again. I will put that in the freezer when I'm finished preparing vegetables, and the process starts all over. And I've got some diced, that's the thick part of some Chinese leaves. I'll save the leafy part for a bit later. I'll put that in slightly later or else it'll overcook. And I'm just going to have a few ladles of my stock in there. And this is the point where I'd be comfortable starting to think about adding salt. If you add salt to the start of the stock, you've really got no options for adjusting seasoning later. So I like to make the stock without salt and then add it when I'm actually using it. Reason for that is we may reduce this stock down quite a bit during this cooking process, and that concentrates the flavour of the stock, and I want to be able to do that without making it as salty as seawater. Now that's bubbling away, a couple more things to go in there, which is just one large potato diced it quite small, and some chopped tomatoes. Chopped fresh tomatoes. I also like to have some noodles in there, so I've just got some regular spaghetti, just ordinary dry spaghetti. I'm going to snap that into little pieces, and I'll just cover that to stop that losing too much volume. I've just tested that, and the pasta's about probably 2 or 3 minutes away from where it needs to be. Same thing for the potatoes. So now, a little bit of fresh chopped marjoram, and the rest of that Chinese leaves, the leafy bits, because they'll still stay a bit crisp then. I think we just need a tiny bit more liquid in there. So I could add water, but since I have the stock here, we'll just have another little bit of stock added in. We'll just bring that back up to a simmer while we prepare the final ingredients. And the last thing I'm going to put in there is just some spinach. The amount of time this will cook for is basically from kitchen to table. So this will just go in at the very last minute. Add some chives from the garden. So I'm just going to snip those together, just chop them into here. And those are going to go in literally as I take it off the heat, so that they stay nice and green and fresh and really just wilt and add a nice fresh flavour and colour to our soup. And of course, the little bits of chives that were too small to snip in the stock box. Okay, I'm just about to serve up. I'm just going to do a final taste for seasoning now. So, see if I can get with a bit of pasta in there, a few other vegetables. Oh, that's really good. I'm just going to add a teeny tiny little bit of salt, just because those potatoes and pasta have absorbed a little bit and mitigated some of the initial salt. Okay, and right before serving, that spinach and chives, I'm just going to stir that in and let the residual heat of the dish just wilt that down a little bit before we serve. There you go, it doesn't take much. Spinach cooks really quick, so that's wilted down already. Great. Right, let me just do a really quick taste of this before we sign off to the next segment. Here we go. And actually adding that spinach at the last minute, that was really worth doing. It does, like most things, need a little twist of pepper on there. That's so tasty. The flavour in that stock is so deep. So if you haven't made stock from scratch before, I recommend it's well worth a try. So we're at Hengistbury Head and Mudderford Beach, and here's a really common coastal plant. This is wild radish, and it's not worth digging up the roots of these. They are related to cultivated radishes, but you wouldn't find anything worth eating under the ground here. However, after the flowers, you do get these seed pods. And sometimes they're just one, like that. Sometimes they're two. Sometimes it's a whole string of seeds. These seed pods are edible. Kind of weird looking things, aren't they? So let's give one a taste. crisp texture and, unsurprisingly, tastes of mild radish. Oh, that one had a bit of fire to it. As you can see from the four-petalled flowers, this is a plant that's in the cabbage and mustard family. And it is, I don't know if it's the ancestor of cultivated radishes, it's certainly a close relative. Let's find another one. There are some more seed pods there, so there's one with 3. So I'll find a nice small one this time. I'm going to give that a taste. Slightly bitter, but very radishy. I imagine that would be quite good in a stir fry. Really quick update on my dandelion metheglin. A change has occurred, quite an exciting one, and it's happened quite abruptly. I'm just going to drop the camera down so you can have a look. So as you can probably see here, it's started to clear, and it did so really suddenly. Just over the course of about 3 or 4 days, all of that suspended sediment just suddenly dropped out of suspension, and what we've got in there now is actually quite a clear liquid. It looks more cloudy actually than it is at the moment, mainly because there's still some material adhering to the inside of the glass. So actually what's inside of there is a lot clearer than what you're seeing on the camera here. Now it is still fermenting a little bit, so I can't stop just yet. But we won't be very far off, and I hope the next update will be me bottling it. I'm going to leave it in this container for probably about another couple of weeks at least, until it completely stops fermenting, and until I feel confident that it's cleared as much as it's going to. There is clearly still fermentation going on inside of there, although at a much lower rate than previously. Maybe one bubble every 2 or 3 minutes now. So we'll just have an update on the garden stuff. That's the Loquat plant now. This is one of the new leaves that's grown this year. Magnificent, great big corrugated leaves. They're really good. So as long as we keep feeding this, we'll get more of these enormous leaves, and that will help to feed the plant, which will help it to thicken up its stems and develop and so on. So yeah, really happy with that. Got to think about what we're going to do longer term with that, but that's part of another plan. My pepper plants just starting to show some little flower buds. These are the ones I planted out in the garden. Lots of weeds here, so we do need to actually go over and do a bit of weeding here. There's a sow thistle there. Get rid of that. That's Jenny's strawberry spinach. And those are Jenny's cucamelons at the back. They're all doing very well. Strawberry spinach, we've been harvesting leaves off of this already. It's doing really well. It's one of those things where you can just pick off leaves, use them, and come again later for some more. This is the so-called strawberry part of it, which is the seed clusters, and as those develop they'll turn into kind of red strawberry looking type of things. They don't taste like strawberries, they're going to taste like seeds. I have got some other pepper plants which I planted in this trough here, and these are doing rather better, and I think it's probably just because there's some plant food mixed in with the general purpose compost I used. But again, there we've got flower buds appearing, so expect to see flowers and hopefully chilies quite soon. And I almost forgot to tell you about my Chilean guava plant, or murta, which is flowering quite beautifully at the moment. Let's have a look at the flowers. It's been raining here. These beautiful little pink bells. How about that? So that's promising a decent crop of berries later in the year, which is great. I'm going to try today to make flapjacks out of only 2 ingredients. That's oats and dates. Well, actually it's 4 ingredients because it's also going to be water and a little bit of salt. So 200 grams of dates. These are dried dates, by the way. 200 grams of those. Just enough water to cover them. That'll do. I'm just going to leave those for a couple of hours. You could leave it overnight. If you use warm water, it'll go quicker than cold. About 2.5 hours later, and I can see these dates have really swelled up. They've gone soft, so I can squish them very easily. And that water has gone a kind of golden caramel colour. I've got about 250 grams of oats here, but first I'm going to blend up these dates. Now, I probably could have just done that with a fork, mashing them inside the soaking container, but I blended them in the food processor really just to get me a really nice smooth, or hopefully smooth, almost like a caramel sauce. And then that's going to go into the bowl with the oats. I think we might need some more water. So I've got another 50 grams of dates here. So it's a total of 250 grams each of oats and dates. But this last 50 grams of dates, I'm just going to snip up into little chunks, just for a bit of variety of texture and appearance. Now, of course, we are making something here which is more or less completely carbs. There's a fair bit of fibre in here as well, but in terms of macronutrients, this is nearly all carbs. So it's not something you'd want to live on, but it's going to be fine to have a little square of this with a cup of coffee or something just to get the day going. A little bit of salt. And now I'm just going to stir those ingredients together. I'm expecting this to be a bit too dry to start with, so I probably will have to add some more water just to help those oats hydrate. Dates are actually mostly sugar, so there's no need for any additional sugar in this recipe. That actually looks like the right texture, so it hardly needed any extra water. So that's it, just oats and dates in equal weight. I'm just pressing this now into a baking tray, which I've lined with greaseproof. You could just put that in the fridge and let it set. If you're doing the whole raw food thing, I'm not. So I'm actually going to level that out and then give it a bake in the oven, 180 degrees for probably 20 minutes or something, just really to bring those ingredients together and hopefully just to crisp up the top a little bit. There we go. So that's going to go in the oven now at 180 Celsius for 20 to 25 minutes. Okay, there we go. It smells great. It looks good. A little bit crusty around the edges. I'm just going to let that cool down now before we turn it out and cut it. Right, this is cooled down now. Came out pretty easily. I'll just pull off that paper. It might still be a little bit too soon to cut it, but I'm going to have a go and see what it cuts like. That's okay. Probably should have planned that a bit better. We can recover from that. There we go. I think if anything, what this is lacking is fat. I do think mixing in some oil or butter would have improved this a great deal. It's okay. So I suppose what I've really made here is some kind of fruity, oaty bar. Barossa. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a massive success. It's okay. It could do with some ginger. It could do with some butter, to be honest. But it's edible. Flavour's too neutral to be really enjoyable, I would say. But we might be able to do some interesting things with this, like turn it into porridge. Here's a handy tip you never asked for that I thought I would share anyway. My little box of salt was getting a bit tatty as I was getting quite near the end of it. So I transferred the salt into one of these pots. You've probably seen me use these before. These are pots that came with some sort of little dessert in them, and they always seem to me too good to throw away. A single serving of dessert in a lovely little clay pot. So I've got a few of these that I use for various things. So my salt's in there, but I did happen to discover that these Nutella lids fit perfectly on top of those little pots. How about that? Rendering them instantly much more useful for storing small amounts of things. Thanks for watching Tips You Never Asked For, and I hope to see you again soon.